Three times. And then here's a clicker down. If you want to go to the next level. Hold on.
I believe you.
All right. Now we're ready. Get your hand out coming out. Yay! También! Without further ado.
Alright, hello everyone. How's everybody doing? There's some handouts coming around. It's a presentation, so y'all have a copy of it. So like Rodrigo said, I'm an alumni of the outreach team. I was an outreach ambassador last year. It was a great opportunity, amazing time. I've done a ton of presentations now. I still get nervous, so bear with me. But yeah, so I made this presentation when I was in college. That's why there's a UCSB Ideas logo down there. When I was in college, I gave this presentation to a lot of high school students, trying to encourage them to apply for scholarships and trying to give them the tips and tricks of how you can make it easier for yourself. So, what is scholarships? Does everybody here has heard of scholarships, right? Yeah. I heard the other presentation going too. So yeah, scholarships are all free money. It's basically you don't have to pay it back. It's not loans. It's free money that you get, and it goes towards your education. And what a lot of people ask me is that, what happens with this scholarships when I could just work? Why not just work the whole time? Right? There's this difference between a job and scholarships. A lot of folks have a hard time saying, well, I could just be working full time, saving up money instead of applying for scholarships. And so I would like to go through an exercise here. First of all, let's say you all apply to a scholarship. It's $500 scholarship. And on average, how much time do you all think that it takes to fill out a scholarship? Any guesses? Or based on experience?
2 to 3 hours.
2 to 3 hours. Anyone else?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. All right. Big spectrum. Anyone else? 7 hours. All right. 2 weeks. All right. Yeah. So yeah, most people it takes them about 7 to 10 hours. Because of getting documents together, writing your essays, doing all that stuff. This is considering just the actual time you put into it. So, some people will say 2 hours if they're really good at it. Other folks will, take a little more time trying to get some feedback for it, which you should. Let me say 10 hours. So let's say it takes you 10 hours to write an essay or to turn in a scholarship application, and you get the scholarship for $500. How much is that on an hourly wage? Yeah, $50 an hour. So how many of you know of a job that y'all can get for $50 an hour right now? Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So the cool thing about scholarships is that you can make this really amazing wage just by applying for scholarships. And let's say that with this workshop, we're trying to make it so that you can turn in scholarships in 2 hours. That you're really good at it. It takes only 2 hours to make it. So instead of it being $50 an hour, you're looking at $250 an hour, right? So that's huge. You're making more than a freaking doctor sometimes. So that's awesome. And that's what this presentation is all about. It's about how do you make yourself be better at making or applying to scholarships. A lot of people always ask me too is, well, why are you giving this presentation? Like, yeah, that's great, but I don't always get the scholarships that I apply for, so really that's my time wasted, all this stuff. So I wanted to, introduce this whole presentation with my story. And so I am undocumented. When I was in high school, I went into my counselor's office, and I told her, I'm undocumented. I want to go to school. I want to go to college, to four-year university, but I don't have financial aid. I don't have any resources. My parents don't make enough money. How do I pay for it? And she just looked at me and said, well, I don't really know what you mean. What, you don't have papers, so you're illegal or something? And I was like, yeah, I'm undocumented. I don't have any way to pay. And she was like, well, I really don't know that you can even apply to college, so maybe you could just go to the community college, which I don't even know if that you can do, but yeah, you should maybe do that because it's cheaper. You can just pay it off or work somewhere and maybe get an associate's and do something with your life kind of thing. So yeah, she was horrible counselor. So I left there and I was really, really upset, angry, and I went to my AVID class, and AVID is a college prep class. For those of you, how many of you have heard of AVID? Yeah, AVID's amazing. So I went to my AVID teacher, and they were preparing for college as well. They were doing their college applications, talking about financial aid, the same thing, all those topics, and I was just really not into it. So Mr. Sterling came up to me after class, and he was like, "Well, what's going on? What's the problem?" And I told him, "I'm undocumented. I just told the counselor. She basically told me there's no options for me." And so what he told me was, "Well, have you ever heard of scholarships? Have you ever thought of applying for scholarships?" And so I went home. I asked my sister, and she started telling me about scholarships as well. And I started looking them up. And next day I come to class, and he tells me, "I have a proposition for you. So if you really want to go to college, we're going to do this. You're going to, instead of coming to my class for an hour a day, you're going to go across the hall to the lab, to the computer lab. You can spend that hour just looking for scholarships, applying for scholarships. Do what you got to do, but submit your scholarships." And so what he told me was, this is the deal. If you turn in 10 scholarships every quarter, there's 4 quarters for a year, then I'll give you an A. And your grade's going to be completely based on how many scholarships you turn in. So you turn in 10, you get an A. You turn in 9, you get a B. You turn in 8, C, so on and so forth. And so that really pushed me to go and start applying for scholarships. I went in every single day, went into the computer lab, looked them up, and I started applying and applying and applying and applying. And so by the end of the year, there I was. I got my acceptance letters to UC Berkeley, UCLA, UCI, UC Santa Barbara, and I still didn't get any scholarships. I hadn't heard back from anyone. So Santa Barbara actually came back to me, and they offered me a scholarship. They offered me the Regents Scholarship for, I think, $6,000 a year. And that was the only school that offered me financial aid, so I took it. I said, let's be real, I need to follow the money to get an education. So I went with it. And 2 weeks later, I started getting calls from the scholarship agencies, started getting award letters. I got my first letter 2 weeks after I accepted from Carl's Jr. It was $1,000 scholarship that they sent me. They said, "Congratulations, here's $1,000 for you to go to college." And that was amazing. It was amazing just giving that to my parents and showing them and having them think, wow, that's $1,000 less that I have to pay for. And next thing I knew, I was getting all these letters, and left and right, I was getting some rejections, some acceptances. And by the time I graduated, I had turned in about 70 scholarships throughout the year. And I received about $63,000 by the time I graduated in scholarships. Thank you. Yeah, so that was amazing for me. That was a huge relief for my parents. I used that money. I went to college to Santa Barbara, and I was like, you know what? I've never had my own room. I've never had my own bed. So I got a single bedroom, like single dorm for a year. It's like, I'm rolling in money right now. And yeah, it was like one of the best years of my life right there. Just being able to have my own place. Like, oh my God, it was amazing. So yeah, it was great. I had a really great time. And then throughout the years, I still kept on applying when I was an undergrad. I kept on applying and applying and applying. I probably received another like $20,000 throughout those 4 years. And actually what ended up happening was by the time I graduated from college, it was the last year was when the California Dream Act passed and I got the financial aid from the university. They gave me, I think, like $12,000 for the year. And I had applied to a ton of scholarships throughout the year as well, so I ended up graduating with extra money. I graduated with no loans, no debt at all whatsoever. I graduated, I think, with about $10,000 extra. And I used that to put a down payment for my car. And so I bought a new car at my senior year of college with scholarship money. Super awesome. So definitely, I think, if you want to get a job, be a scholarship writer. It's a hell of a job. So, what is the best way to start? Going after this story, I really want to point out some of the things that I've done throughout the years that helped me be a better scholarship writer. So first things first, you need to look and find these scholarships, right? So the thing that you have to do is that you don't go it alone. Don't just get stuck into your own room or library or whatever and just try to do it by yourself. The best way to go forward is actually to let everybody know that you're looking for scholarships. Find somebody, one of your friends, and just tell them, hey, why don't we apply for scholarships for an hour a day or an hour a week or something like that. next thing you know, they'll be giving you scholarships that they find. You give them scholarships that you find, and it helps each other out. So instead of just one person looking for scholarships, now you have two. Same thing with teachers, counselors. They always get letters from different schools, from agencies looking for applicants. So then once you tell them, then they'll have you in mind. So they'll give you those scholarship applications. And another really great thing for undergrad and colleges is just being able to join a lot of these groups and kind of like organizations, because a lot of them have scholarships specifically for those groups. So that's another really great way to look. Also, internet is your best friend, right? So I would say don't just stick with Google, because even though Google's amazing, there are other search engines that you can look for, and there are other ways to find scholarships. So definitely try out as many different search engines as possible. And more importantly, there's a lot of like listservs already out there. So a lot of groups like E4FC, you have the 10,000 Degrees, United We Dream, who have compiled lists of scholarships. And sometimes it is difficult, right, because they have to keep updating them all the time. But still, it's really up to you to really go through with these and find the scholarships that are applicable to you. And there's this one of the outreach ambassadors last year, Sarai. She actually is about to start an app specifically for dreamers who are looking for scholarships. So look out for that, and that's going to be really, really great, because then you can manage all your scholarships just using the one app. So shameless plug for her right there.
Well
What's that?
well deserved.
Yeah. So again, moving on, searching tips for when you start looking for these scholarships. Don't just look for scholarships. Obviously, that's that's what you're looking for. But look at some other keywords such as grants, fellowships, foundation, because there's other ways that people will word them so that it comes out differently, but it's still scholarships. And then you also want to make sure that you kind of look for scholarships that are applicable to you, right? So if you're going to study engineering, then you want to put engineering for undocumented students or engineering for a specific school. Depending on what major you're trying to go into, that's what you want to look for. And then one thing that I did that really, really, really helped me out was actually creating a portfolio. And the portfolio really is just a folder that had everything that I had ever used. So all my essays, all my letters of rec, all my resumes. And so I'm going to go into detail for all of these little parts and pieces that I kept. So first of all, some of the eligibility requirements for scholarships, you're looking at community service, you're looking at leadership, you're looking at some transcripts, letters of rec, your grades. All of these things are really important when you're looking at applying for scholarships. And so going down the list, we're going to start off with community service. So one of the things that I've heard and talked about with some of the scholarship agencies is that they really want to know that you're giving back to your community, because they kind of have this concept of like paying it forward, right? They're giving you money. They don't expect you to give it back to them, right? It's not a loan, but they do want to know that you're going to make contributions towards your community, towards bettering those who come after you, the next generation. So that's really where community service comes into play, and actually a lot of scholarships really, really, really emphasize community service. And one of the things I really like to say is that you should really do something that you feel passionate about, right? Whether it is volunteering at hospitals or whether it's at a homeless shelter, something that makes you feel, happy doing that is better than just going out there and volunteering for 20 different things and not really feeling it. Next thing is leadership. So leadership is really, really important, especially for scholarships. What you're trying to show here is that you're a leader, right? That you are creating your own path. And the really cool thing about it is that you're trying to show them that you're going to be a really good person, really good student when you go to college, right? If you're showing initiative when you're in high school, that means you're going to be a really good student going to college, because once you go to college, you don't have somebody watching over you 24/7, right? So you want to make sure that that the student is going to be a successful student. Now, one of the other things that a lot of people are scared about, right, is the transcripts and the GPA cutoff. A lot of folks think, if I don't have a 3.5 or higher or 3.0 or higher, then really I'm not going to get any scholarships. And that's not really true. It varies by scholarship. Some of the bigger scholarships will have some cutoff GPA, and they will discard some scholarships or some applicants based on GPA, but not all of them. And the thing that happens is actually there's a lot of scholarships that people just don't apply for. And so, what happened when I was in high school, I started applying to just every scholarship that I could apply for. And there were some scholarships that said, you need to be a resident or a citizen, but I applied. And then when they got back to me, they said, well, actually, you're the only one who applied, so you're going to get the first, second, and third prize. So here you go, all three. And that was, yeah, it was really cool. Like, instead of getting just a $500 check, I got like $2,000, right? So it was really cool, and they just, didn't have enough people applying. So even if you are afraid of the GPA cutoff, just do it. Just apply for it. You don't lose anything by applying for it. Another good story, when I was in high school, one of my close friends, he had a really hard time freshman year. He was, his parents left him. He basically became homeless freshman year. And he just had a really hard time. He failed all his classes, was doing really, really bad. And then sophomore year, he just made a complete turnaround. I don't know what happened, but he just turned around and started doing really well in school. But his GPA was horrible, right? His freshman year, sophomore year, he had really bad grades. And so by the time he was graduating, was applying for college and for scholarships, he actually had like a 2.1 or something like that. And he applied for this one scholarship, which was a full ride scholarship, but they were asking for a 3.2 or 3.3, I think. And he applied, and he basically just shared his story of how he went from being homeless to now doing really well and really wanting to move forward with his education. And what happened was he got the scholarship. He got it for the full ride, and he was like featured as like the top scholar for that year. It was just amazing because it's really a lot about powerful storytelling, being able to tell your story in a way that it connects with somebody, and that's really where those essays come in hand. Now, letters of recommendation are also very, very difficult. How many of you have requested letters of rec? Yeah. So how do y'all usually go forward asking for them? Yep.
When I go to my career mentor, I'll just ask them. But when I go to a professor that I don't share that similar experience, I ask them, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation?
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it. You basically want to make sure that you're getting a letter of recommendation that's going to be very, very strong and very supportive of you. You don't go to a random teacher, a teacher that you've only really been, a student in, don't really go talk to them because they're just going to write you a general letter of recommendation, if that, right? Sometimes they even have these templates already and they'll just swap out a name for another student. Because teachers and professors are really busy and they have a lot of other things that they have to do. So one thing that I did actually that really helped was just to create those little folders where I put in my resume, put in my personal statement, I put in just information about the scholarship, make it as easy as possible for them, and then I just gave them these folders and said, hey, can you write this letter of recommendation for me? And you give them ample time, right, 2-3 weeks at least to say yes or no, and then write the letter. So it was really, really nice because then I was able to get all these really strong letters of recommendation. And I started asking a lot of different teachers, right? And that was kind of my point to actually go and connect with these teachers and professors who I would have otherwise never have talked to outside of the classroom. And so I started sharing my story to a lot of teachers and professors, and then that's really where I started getting some really strong letters of recommendation because they got to know me as a person, as an individual, instead of just some other student in the classroom. So it's really good to know that the better the recommender or the person who's writing the letter of rec knows you, then the better that letter is going to be. And another thing too is that they also sometimes they will ask you to write the letter of recommendation for yourself, and that's kind of a little awkward for me whenever they ask me that because it's weird writing about yourself or trying to like brag about yourself because it's just weird, but you got to do it. And sometimes it's actually been worked out really well for me because I'll see a scholarship and I'll find out exactly what they're looking for in their applicants. And then I'll just highlight those specific attributes about like my experiences, my leadership, and then I'll give those letters to the recommender. They'll read it through and then they'll sign it off. Question?
Oh, I was just gonna say, have you ever had a teacher tell you no? Like, maybe like they're too busy. But like, have you ever had a teacher say, oh, no, I can't write your recommendation?
Yeah. Actually, in college, I had one professor tell me no because he was too busy. And it was also because I asked him, I think, a week before it was due, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be considerate about the fact that they also have really busy schedules.
Yeah, so time is always.
Yeah, time is really important.
How do you approach the professors who just talk about yourself and hand him or her your resume and just come up with the letter of rec when the person barely knows you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I usually go into the office. set up an appointment usually with so for professors in undergrad college, I would set up an appointment with them. Say I would like to come in and talk to you about the scholarship that I'm trying to apply for, and to share a little bit about myself, so we can get to know each other more. And then based off of that, depending on whether they say yes or no, then that's usually where I'll continue forward, or I'll just say thank you for your time. I'll find someone else.
I have a follow-up. Would you approach only the professors that you did well in the class, or no?
That's a personal decision. That's up to you. It also comes down to like who the professor or who the person is that you're trying to get the recommendation for. But usually, I would say you definitely want to choose the professors for the classes that you've done really well, because that is something that they're going to highlight, right? Is that you do really well in their class. You don't want a teacher to say, well, they did okay in my class. You want someone that's going to write a strong letter. And that's kind of the point of asking them, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation? Yep.
I would just add into that too, that sometimes working with students, trying to just chat the professor up before you get there, so the first time you're really in their office talking to them isn't necessarily asking for the letter of rec. Like, you could do that if you have a good connection with them already, but otherwise maybe you want to go ask them about the homework, or maybe you want to ask them a little bit about how they got started doing the work they're doing, so you've built a little bit of rapport and they have a little more sense of who you are, and then later you can come back and hit them up and be like, oh, I'm doing this too, and then that kind of builds it over the semester.
I would also add, I have students ask for letters of recommendation for a variety of reasons and so forth. And if there are students that I only know in the context of their, activities within my activities or what we do, the programs that we serve, then I ask for a resume. Give me a copy of your resume, so I know a little bit more about you and so forth. I can only give witness about what you're doing here, but I need to know more what else that you've been doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean by it's really important for you to give them that little handout, basically, the little folder that has your resume, a personal statement, just a little more information about you, so that they can get to know you, outside of the classroom.
Is it bad if you are always asking one professor specifically?
It's not bad. You can always reuse their letters or ask them to write more letters for you. But a lot of scholarships do, or some scholarships will ask for 2 or 3 different letters of recommendation. So it's important to have a couple people that can write letters of rec for you on short notice, or someone that already knows you really well.
Just add on to that, how I approach the letters of rec, I always have one professor that I know who's always going to talk really good about me, who's going to sugarcoat it, and you want to have that professor who's going to talk about your weaknesses and your strengths. So I always try to balance it out, because I feel like if I go to all the professors that are going to talk good about me, it's going to be too like, oh, well, yeah, this student is great, and if I have that balance, it shows like, I don't know, that's how I approach it.
Yeah.
How you guys approach it.
I mean, that's another tactic to approach it. I would say just making sure that at some point that they do show you as a strong applicant, not just saying, oh, well, he is really hard at concentrating during this time, but that they turn it around, right? That they say, but really,
because one professor, I was kind of my spring semester, I was kind of struggling in his class. It was for my linear algebra class, and I asked him for a letter of rec, and when he gave it to me, it wasn't sealed or anything. It was open, and I couldn't help but to not read it. It was open. It was just like standing right there, just right in my face. And I read it, and I was like, wow, like he really like talked like good about me. I thought he was gonna like. I mean, he did label out my strengths and my weaknesses, and I was surprised, and I thought that letter was not gonna be that strong, and it was really well.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one piece of advice that I would give is to actually ask if they can share the letter of recommendation with you before they submit it, just so that you can get a viewpoint of it. And not a lot of professors or not a lot of people will actually say yes, just because there's also a lot of scholarships that will directly request a letter of rec to be sent to them. So just be wary, but you can always ask them, and especially if it's somebody who you know and somebody who you know is going to write a good letter of rec to you, then that's usually not a problem. If they say, no, I don't want you to see it, then that might be a bit of a red flag to wonder whether or not they're going to ask you to write you a bad letter.
And I don't think they all have to be just from professors. They can be from,
No, yeah, definitely not. Yeah, so a lot of scholarships will ask like somebody from the community, a peer, a professor, a mentor. So it could be basically anybody, just as long as you follow the scholarship, whatever they request for. So. requesting again. Ask far in advance. Make sure that you ask them and give them time. And one of the things that really helped me out too was actually to ask them if I could reuse them. Right. So you were asking about can I just ask the same person over and over? Well, I got to a point in high school where I applied for like 70 scholarships. I was asking these people, like the same teachers, over and over again. So what they ended up telling me was they sent me basically a copy of their letter and said, here's a signed copy. Whenever you need to submit a scholarship, there it is. And it was really cool because what they did is they sent me a Word document, and so I could edit like Dear HENAC Scholarship or Dear blah 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 Scholarship, and then it already had their digital signature. So I didn't even have to go to them to get the signature. All I would do is actually just send them an email, say, hey, I'm applying for the scholarship. Is it okay if I use your letter? And then they would say yes. It's as simple as that, right? They don't have to write another letter. And so I just kept copies of those in that folder that I was carrying them in.
That's really excellent, and I'd say also too, just the step that you did of changing the name is so important. Like you don't just want to take one letter that they sent you and Xerox it to everyone. You wanted to say, oh, this scholarship and then that scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
That way, everybody's not reinventing the wheel.
Exactly. Yeah. So moving on with the resume. Resumes are very important, very critical, especially for scholarship applications. And the thing that I want to highlight here is that the resume for scholarships is very different to a resume for a job, right? You're not applying to get a job at the scholarship agency. You're applying to showcase that whatever it is that you're trying to showcase for that scholarship. Each scholarship is different. They'll look for something different, right? They'll look for either the community service, they'll look for leadership, they'll look for different things. And so that's where you really want to tailor that resume. And it's really, really, really important to tailor your resume to the scholarship agency. You don't want to just use the same resume for every single scholarship, right? And so what I ended up doing was that I kept this master copy, this master resume that I update every single month. I just go back and think back this whole month and I say, what did I learn? What did I do? What did I do differently this year or this month? And what ended up happening was this huge, like, 20-page resume by the end of my senior year. But what was really cool is that every time that I submitted an application, I just had to go into that master resume, pick and choose the parts that were, specific to that scholarship, and then there it was. It was already laid out. It was perfect formatting. I didn't have to mess around with it anymore. So it was really, really easy instead of having to rewrite a whole new resume every single time. So that helped out a lot. And in case, right, sometimes you'll find a scholarship that's due in the next day or that same day. Just have copies of one of your best resumes that you think is really good, so that you can always just kind of get it together really quick.
Yeah, there are some colleges, universities do what's called a co-curricular transcript. Co-curricular transcript is like your academic transcript, but it highlights things that you've done as a student at university, leadership positions and so forth, the skills, the outcomes, and so forth, leadership roles you've held, and so forth. So nowadays, some students will, if for example, they're asking for a copy of your transcripts, you can also send that kind of transcript as well. So it highlights all the things you've done and what you've gotten from those experiences.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point. And then the last point that I wanted to point out actually was to make sure that you get feedback on your resume. Don't just write it and then submit it, because to us we tend to be really proud of our own work, and it's really hard to get criticism. So it may look amazing to you, but maybe there's a typo or a grammar error or something wrong, and it's really, really important that you make sure that those are not present in your resume, because those are big minuses, especially for scholarship agencies. The same thing for jobs. You just don't want to have any errors in your resume. And it's always good to have a second opinion, right? To look back and say, well, you can word this a little bit stronger. You can change this around, or you already said this in this other point, so why not add something new? So it's really, really, really great to go either to a career counselor or going into English teacher, somebody who can really help you. Essays, yeah. Sorry. So with the essays, it's same thing with the resumes. You want to make sure that you get the feedback. Very, very important that you get somebody to read them, go over them, make sure that your spelling is correct, make sure that everything makes sense. It's really, really important. Go ahead. Oh, no. Sorry. It's really important to just start writing essays as soon as possible. Even if you don't have a scholarship that you're applying for, just start writing about your story, your life, and the challenges that you've had to overcome. And over time, it'll become easier to kind of draft it into a story that fits a scholarship. And so what I ended up doing is, since a lot of scholarships tend to have the same kind of prompts, they'll ask tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what are the obstacles that you've overcome. It's kind of very similar questions, similar to even the UC personal statements. And so what I ended up doing was just kind of drafting these essays that were fit depending on, or fit different prompts. And what I ended up doing was just copy and paste basically those prompts to any scholarship, whatever they required, and just kind of edit those essays a little bit to fit the scholarship that I was applying to. And so by the end of the year, I had, I don't know, like 20 or 30 essays that I just had in there, and I just said, this one's for, background, this one's for, statement of purpose, what I'm trying to do, what my career goals are. And then it was these little short, like 2-paragraph, essays. And because it was just, that's what they want, right? They want something that's short, succinct, and that gets the point across. And so that really helped me out too, right? Because now instead of having to rewrite these essays over and over again, I just had them there already. And the other thing that I kept track of was I had an Excel sheet that I basically wrote down, which files I submitted for each application, for each scholarship. And then I kept track of which ones I was getting. And so when I got one that I got the scholarship, I would go back and check the resume, check the essay that I submitted, and then that's how I knew, like, okay, this one got me the scholarship, and then this one didn't. So something here, maybe something was off, maybe I should change it a little bit, and that actually helped me to tailor it down to a really, really good essay by the time it was like at the end of my senior year. And again, just keep copies of those in your portfolio. Other really big questions, especially for undocumented students, is the whole question of citizenship, right? When you have that 9-digit question of what's your social security number. This was a huge demoralizer for me when I was in high school, right? Every time I applied to a scholarship, there was always this question. And so what I ended up doing was I actually asked a lot of them whether they could take an ITIN, which, how many of you know what an ITIN is? Awesome, damn, that's really cool. Yeah, so an ITIN, right, you use an ITIN in place of a social security number to be able to pay your taxes. And when I talked to a lot of scholarship agencies, they basically told me that a lot of the scholarships that they provide, they only require proof that they're giving it to somebody, basically. And that's what the social security number is for, that they're giving it to somebody, they're not like keeping the money to themselves or anything like that. So a lot of them said, ITIN works fine. We can use that. We're not gonna, that can be used in place of the social security number. And so I actually ended up getting a lot of scholarships that were closed off to undocumented students, but because of that ITIN number, became opened up for the students, or for myself. And nowadays, with the DACA social, right, you do have a social, but you also have to be careful, right? You have to make sure that you do ask the question. You don't just submit the scholarship application if it says citizenship required. Don't just submit it because you have a social security number. So, make sure you ask, make sure you email them or call them and let them know that your situation is different, that you have DACA or that you have an ITIN, and ask whether it is okay for them or for you to submit an application with that. And then they'll always let you know.
What happens if you apply to a scholarship that's for a citizen, but then you get it?
If you
never
and you
tell
never,
them
yeah.
that you're not.
Well, so that could be, yeah. So that's gonna backfire, right? They will eventually process what's called, I think it's a or I forgot what the form is, but it's a tax. Sorry. 1090-18, yeah. So that's where you report the scholarships that you're being given, and then those will be linked to the social security number that was linked to you. And so there's ways for them to find out. And if they do find out that you use a fake social or a social that doesn't work, or you're not a citizen, then they're gonna either go forward with some kind of action, or most likely they'll just ask you to return that money to them. I haven't heard that happen because I think everybody usually asks, and I haven't heard of anybody actually using like a fake social or just saying that they're citizens. Good question. And also, one of the things that they do ask is proof of income. A lot of the scholarships are for low-income students, so you do want to make sure that you have copies of your parents' taxes or your taxes if you pay taxes. So that you want to make sure that you can show proof that you are low income or that you are, have whatever that you pay taxes. So it's really important to keep those copies. Also, just be careful. Don't just leave them around. It's sensitive information that you don't want to lose. So keep copies of that, but be careful. other things that I want to point out is for the portfolio is these manila envelopes and the stamps. Sorry, I just got formatted differently. Get a ton of those. Just go to like Costco, get a big box of those manila envelopes, and just buy a whole roll of stamps because, yeah, they will come in. You have no idea how many scholarships I missed because I couldn't get a freaking stamp and I just wasn't able to find one, wasn't able to go to the post office. It was late, it was after hours. So keep that handy. It's really, really, really cool because then you can just slap it on there and put it away and bam, that's easy. Really, really good. Some general advice that I have, mostly about just avoiding scams, making sure that you don't get, sucked into a scholarship that's not a scholarship or somebody that's trying to fish your information. Because when you do apply for scholarships, you are giving some personal information. They do ask you for your, residence, where you live, sometimes your social security number. So you want to make sure that you're cautious about it. So when you apply for scholarships, you should never ever have to pay any kind of dues or application fee because it's free money. It's money that it's available for you as a student, for your education. And you don't want to give any personal information unless you know that this is a reputable scholarship agency. And there's a couple ways to make sure that they are, right? You can either go on their website, see, they'll have like previous stories of other students, and you can contact them. I mean, there's ways to make sure. If you see a scholarship that doesn't have a website, or it's like a shady website, or they're, disappear every once in a while, or their internet goes down, like, you just want to be careful. You just don't want to get, identity theft or anything like that. And this is for everyone, right? Not just undocumented students. Yeah. And then last piece of advice here is that small is the new big, right? You have a lot of scholarships. There's a lot of scholarships out there. And I see a lot of people say, well, I really want to get the big $10,000 scholarship. I really want to go for that $20,000 scholarship. I really want to go for that full ride scholarship. And that's great, and you should. But don't forget about the little ones. Don't forget about the 500, 200, right? Because that's money. That's money that you can pay for food. That's money that you can pay for books, textbooks, whatever you need. And it adds up, man. It really, really, really adds up. Like I said, I applied to 70 scholarships. I think got about 23 scholarships. And most of those were actually small scholarships, and they just, over time, they just kept adding up. And that's where you get a lot of the money. And what's really cool about the little scholarships is that a lot of people don't apply for them. A lot of people actually don't submit applications for them. And like I said before, I applied to a couple scholarships that nobody else applied to. And so I ended up getting the full 3-4 different awards because there was just nobody else that was getting or applying for the scholarships. So definitely apply to every single one that you can apply to. Once you have that, full portfolio down and you have all your essays, letters of rec, everything together, then there's no point for you not to apply, right? You can put it together in less than an hour. So really, really important. Now, I do want to close off the workshop. It's a little short workshop, but I did want to close off with my current situation, right? So I ended up going back to school. I graduated UC Santa Barbara in 2013 with a degree in mechanical engineering. And I started working for a year as a mechanical engineer at a company called Inogen, developing medical devices. And I always wanted to go back to school, and my dream school was Berkeley. I couldn't go because I didn't have money when I was in undergrad, or when I was in high school. So I remember having to reject Berkeley when I was back in high school, and that was horrible. But I decided I want to go back to school. I want to go back to Berkeley. So I started looking them up, and this time around it was different. This time there was a lot more awareness about undocumented students, about DACA, about AB 540 and California DREAM Act. And so I applied to UC Berkeley. I reached out to the director there for bioengineering, and I told him my story. I told him my background and why I was applying. And he basically just told me the same thing that most people said. Well, we've never had an undocumented student apply to this program. We don't know what the process is. But he was actually open to it. And he said, you know what, let's work together. Let's figure out what we can do. And so we started going back and forth, just phone, emails, conversations left and right. And next thing I knew, I was getting interviewed for the master's program in bioengineering, and I got the acceptance. I was offered an acceptance to UC Berkeley. And the best part was that he offered me a full ride tuition. They gave me a full ride scholarship. They gave me a full ride scholarship plus a living stipend to pay for rent and housing and everything, and food. And I basically paid my way through undergrad and a master's program without having to pay anything out of pocket. I just graduated about a month ago from UC Berkeley, Master's of Bioengineering, and in about 2 weeks, I'll be starting as a mechanical engineer for Thermo Fisher, which is a big biotech company here in South San Francisco. So I've done it, and I'm keeping moving forward. I'm definitely going to keep doing more things, but it was a very, very difficult road, very tough journey, but I did it, and I think everybody here can do it, and I know everybody else out there that y'all are going to reach out to definitely have the potentials. And if y'all have any questions at all, if you ever need any information or further suggestions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you. Questions?
Do you think if that teacher didn't set that up for you like that, would you have really dug in such a big way?
You know, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I think it would have been a lot more difficult for me because it does kind of set up that constant commitment to go in and apply for scholarships. Yeah, so it was definitely difficult, but actually what helped me was not so much that, it was one of my best friends. She and I were both applying for scholarships at the same time. Yeah, and so we ended up teaming up a lot. And we ended up going at the same time, going to the library, to the computer labs, and just working together. And yeah, and she actually got way more than I did. She was a citizen, and she got, I think, $120,000 by the time we graduated high school. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So she's super baller.
She bought 2 cars.
Down payment for a house?
Yeah. For real. Yeah.
Graduating?
Yeah, she got the scholarship. I think the Dell scholarship, which gives her like a laptop every other year or something like that. It was crazy. She got so many scholarships. But, so definitely do it.
Brings up the question, do you think it's more probable that students that are citizens get more scholarships than those that are undocumented?
It's a numbers game, I think. And I think it's the fact that they're eligible for a lot more financial aid or more scholarships. And if they do apply to as many or more because they are eligible to more, then chances are that they will. But I think if you apply to 60, 70 scholarships, then your chances of getting a lot of money are better than a citizen who only applies to 10.
You can still keep your email from San
No, it's a Gmail. I just put that.
Oh,
Gotta represent.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna make UCSC.
I know, I need to put them all in there. Well, I just blocked the S and then.
Right, yeah.
In the spirit of scholarships, I got called into the math department yesterday. It's $20 in here. It's a little scholarship, but everything counts.
There you go.
Oh.
Yeah.
I did not bring it because I knew we were going to have a scholarship.
There you go. Any other questions? Comments, concerns?
So, do you recommend students to talk about their undocumented status if they are undocumented in their essay for scholarship?
It comes down to the prompt. It depends on what the question is, but usually you'll have the question of, tell us about an obstacle that you have to overcome, and really that's kind of a huge obstacle, right? The fact that that's a daily obstacle that we have to deal with, that we're undocumented, that we have to struggle about. Are my parents going to get deported today? How am I going to get home? How am I going to drive without a license? So that was a huge struggle for me growing up. So I definitely think that it's a very valuable story to put out there, especially just because it raises awareness too. Sometimes these scholarship agencies won't know about undocumented students, but once they read your story, then it just kind of starts creating those avalanches of information. But yeah, if you feel comfortable. Yeah.
About how many hours did you put in per week for scholarships?
So it was an hour a week, or hour a day for 5 days, so 5 hours a week.
You got that much money. You're
Yeah.
amazing, you know that, right? I admire you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can we email you like resume and stuff, and you can like look over it, or you can just.
You can definitely send it to me. I am a lot more free now since I'm not in school anymore. But yeah, definitely, if you need some help, I can definitely send some
Only
comments.
because I've been re-editing my resume, and I have not started a cover letter, so I'm starting that already.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just need some help with that.
Yeah, of course. Anything else?
I think I just wanted to add like a comment to the conversation around like should you talk about being undocumented in your essay, as well as the question about should you apply to a scholarship if it has a strict um, requirement for the applicants to be U.S. citizens. And Jose Arriola, who's the training and relationships manager at E4FC, when he was in high school, he actually applied for the Berwyn Foundation scholarship that required you to be a U.S. citizen, and he applied without submitting a social security number. And when the foundation received the scholarship, they said, "Wait, how come the student doesn't have a social security number?" And they called him, and the fact that he applied created a conversation internally for the foundation, and that conversation turned into, let's make a policy decision. Are we going to allow undocumented students to come into the scholarship? And because of Jose's application, they started deciding that year that they were going to award Jose, and for the next years, they were going to start awarding undocumented students. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times you might see that in a scholarship, and being able to submit it without lying about your status can allow for those conversations to happen internally. And when you apply and you talk about being undocumented, it also creates that conversation internally. And for the scholarships that you are receiving, that they are allowing undocumented students, you start creating a legacy for that scholarship to know that they can invest in undocumented students and that they will be successful. And being an alumni of that scholarship, you can talk to other scholarship foundations and other scholarship providers and start sharing your story. So that's always, applying for a scholarship is both at the same time an act of like self-preservation and self-advancement, and an act of advocacy at the same time.
Any other questions? All right. Well, and that's my presentation. Thank you.
All right. A 20-minute, 30-minute break because we ended 10 minutes early.